even though I have to manually lift it.
Oh,
You have to manually lift the garage because,
Just the door, it's not automatic.
wow.
So you
All right.
just,
So
slide it.
happy Rosh Chodesh to everybody. Today is Rosh Chodesh Shvat, the first day of Shvat. Speaking of winter, Rosh Chodesh Shvat is when we actually start speaking about spring because in exactly 2 weeks we'll be celebrating Tu B'Shvat, which is, when the first seedlings in Israel begin their growth cycle. So Tu B'Shvat, or the month of Shvat, really reminds us of the potential. Even when everything's covered in snow and ice and it's freezing cold, we know that deep down underground, things are happening. Things are moving and kind of getting ready for their grand presentation in the spring. So definitely a lot of hope thinking of spring and Shvat. We are about to start chapter 37. Chapter 37 is known to be, anyone want to know what the claim to fame of chapter 37 is? The longest chapter in Tanya. It is the longest chapter. It's a pretty powerful chapter as well, and it really lays out, I would say, the mechanics. The mechanics, we say our actions affect the world. Our actions affect the universe. Our actions affect everyone else. How? How does that actually happen? When we say every good deed we do adds up, all the good deeds together, we're going to bring Mashiach. We're going to usher in the era of redemption. How? How does that work? Is there like a scale that tips? Is there a chart that needs to be filled? Like, what, practically speaking, how do you alter universe code? By doing mitzvahs and doing good deeds. So that's really the focus of chapter 37. Um, to start with, let me ask you this question. Have you ever felt like your contribution to the world might be insignificant? I think many of us go through different times in our life that we feel like, whatever, someone else could have done that. What I do is not so big. What I've done is not so, earth shattering. What would you tell someone, let's say someone's talking to you, a good friend, a child, somebody who's coming to you for advice and telling you that they don't feel like their contribution really makes that big of a difference. How would you comfort them? Any ideas? What do you tell someone who feels like, whatever, I do, okay, I help a few people. It's not a big deal. I have my little organization in my little corner of the world. Like it does not really so significant in the bigger picture. Arlene?
I guess you would say that every person matters, and helping one person or doing one thing, you don't know how that is going to blossom and affect lots of other entities.
Thank you. Eileen, you want to share something as well?
Let me mute this.
I was just going to say that I would say the same thing, that every contribution matters. That it's it adds to it's an addition to what's the word what am I thinking of? Every contribution is meaningful and important and necessary and has meaning and is important and matters.
Thanks, Eileen. Thank you. Lorraine, you want to add something as well?
So, I think one of the most beautiful foundational beliefs in Judaism is if you save one life, you've saved the world. And so, that came up today with someone that I was interviewing, and this person is very, very well known in the Dallas Jewish community and very, very wealthy. And I started digging because I knew that there was something deeper. And he teared up. We had an hour and a half interview, and he teared up when he said that someone who worked for him, a young mother, came into his office crying and telling him that she needed, time off because she was going to get a hysterectomy. And he said, "We're going to get a second opinion." And he she didn't have the money to do anything, and he paid for her to fly down to MD Anderson, and it turned out that her cancer could be taken care of without taking out her reproductive organs. And his eyes teared up, and he said, at that baby's breasts, she made an announcement that this child was in the world because of me, and they named him his Hebrew name after me. And he said, "I've never done something I'm more proud of." And I looked at him and I said, "That's because that's the most Jewish thing you've ever done. Like, of all your millions and millions and, your expansive this and your donation, 5 million to this one and whatever, you saved a life. You
Wow.
created a world." Oh, and she said, "I would have never been a mom. I would have never," and she was sobbing and he was sobbing, and
Oh,
he's
wow.
telling me this. And I think that's, kind of the core is that Judaism, we believe you save one life, you've saved the world, because he created a whole world for this young woman that she wouldn't have had.
That's an incredible story. Thanks for sharing that. In chapter 37, the Tanya builds more on these ideas, everything that everyone's mentioning here, by really breaking down this idea, not just telling us every action is significant, everything you do makes a big deal, but really breaking down for us that at the end of the day, every single action that's done is another piece of a grand puzzle. And every one of us has access to pieces of the puzzle that others don't have access to. And every single one of the pieces of that puzzle is necessary in order for the world to reach its ultimate state. So, we're going to say everyone's needed. We're all in this together. We really are all in this together, because even the small good actions that I do in the, behind closed doors of my home or in my little corner of the world that maybe I feel like don't affect, maybe I don't see that they affect anybody. Maybe I'm just, maybe I'm doing mitzvahs that are just between me and God in a small little room that nobody sees. But the Tanya is going to break down for us that really every single mitzvah that we do is part of this larger picture, and all of them together is what sums up the purpose of creation. And we could backtrack a little bit. We've been talking about this idea of the purpose of creation, and we really got into this chunk of chapters by asking the question that a Benoni or an aspiring Benoni might ask at this stage of studying Tanya and say, all right, we put so much emphasis on, action is the main thing. Action is the main thing. You don't have to become anything. You don't have to reach an ultimate goal of becoming a, very refined, perfect human. As long as you're doing good, you're hitting the goal. And it might lead someone to feel dejected. Like, you're saying that I just have to keep working hard and doing things, even though maybe I don't feel accomplished. Maybe I don't feel like I'm becoming better. Maybe I'm not reaching this, goal that if you tell me that there's a finish line, by the finish line is when I have done X amount of commandments, I am now the perfect Jew. I get my diploma. Or when I do X amount of, good things, or when I reach a certain point, then I'm upgraded. But the Tanya tells us it's not the case. The Tanya spent so many chapters telling us that it's not about changing who we are. It's about doing what needs to get done, right? We said the Benoni is someone who is still a human being with human emotions and internal struggles and wakes up every morning and finds it hard to do the right thing, but keeps at that battle every single day of their life. So we say, well, that's depressing. I don't want to keep at the battle. I want to know when I'm going to win this battle. So this chunk of chapters has been talking about this idea of saying that the only reason you might find it depressing is if you're looking at life purpose from a very narrow perspective, from a very personal perspective. If I see my life purpose to become the ultimate person that I can be, then I believe the ultimate person that I can be is a tzaddik. So yeah, I'm going to be pretty depressed when I find out that it's not so easy to become a tzaddik and I have to keep, working hard every single day. It doesn't necessarily get easier. But if I zoom out and look at the world from God's perspective, then I'll have a whole different set of glasses to use. And the Tanya has been building up this idea that from God's perspective, it's not about a bunch of humans achieving perfection. From God's perspective, he wants one thing and one thing only. He wants this world to become an abode for him. He wants it to become his home. He wants it to become a place where he can, so to speak, kick off his shoes and just sit back on the couch because it's so godly. This physical, mundane world that doesn't seem to scream holiness and godliness, that has so many things that seem ugly and horrible in it and don't seem holy and pure, this world should become holy. This world we should reveal that beneath all the layers, it truly is holy. That's the goal we're trying to get to. And when that goal is achieved, that's when the world reaches its ultimate purpose. And that's a discussion we're in the middle of, where the Tanya last chapter started telling us what's the ultimate purpose. The coming of the redemption, that's the ultimate purpose. And every single one of us is doing a piece to help bring the world to that place. So even if in my little life, I don't feel like I accomplished so much, and I don't see that I met all these big goals, but every single thing that I have done is actually a whole bunch of puzzle pieces that I have, added to this collective puzzle so that the whole world could reach this perfection because of me and because of you, because of every single one of us. But that's what we're going to go into much more detail in this chapter. Yes, Lorraine.
So when we talk about the redemption and that everyone who has passed on will be back, I don't really know that I know what that means in Jewish terms. I know what that means in Day of the Walking Dead, where they all come back. I'm hoping that's not our vision, but I don't know that I know what that means. What does that mean in Jewish lingo?
So I'm not familiar with Day of the Walking Dead, so I'm not sure exactly what you're referencing, but the best description we have is from Maimonides, because we don't have a lot of description. We have, different references throughout the Talmud, throughout the Torah. Maimonides is the one that comes the closest to really spelling out for us what it is that we're anticipating. And he basically divides it into two eras. He said there's going to be an era called Yemot HaMashiach, the days of Mashiach, which is really going to be a almost like a socio-political change. It's not going to be miraculous. It's just going to be better. The Jews will all gather in Israel. There will be one Jewish leader. His name will be Melech HaMashiach, King Mashiach. He is going to lead the Jews in rebuilding the temple. We're going to have this third temple that's going to once again become the focal point of our lives. And we're going to all be back the way it used to be, where Jews have this autonomy and we're living a very rich, meaningful life, and we're all united under one leader in Israel. That's the first segment. The second segment, and Maimonides doesn't give a lot of clarity, and there seem to be different opinions and different ways it can come about of how long, the first segment will last before we move on to the second segment. The second segment is what's referred to as Tchiyat HaMetim, the resurrection of the dead, which really refers to the whole miraculous time that's going to happen, which at that time, Judaism teaches us that yes, all those who have passed on from previous generations will come back to life. They will first come back to life the way they looked before they died. So if somebody was ill or missing a limb or something, at first they will come back in that way so that their loved ones can recognize them. And then everyone will be cured. The people, the current people and the old people who come back to life will be cured, and there will be no more sickness or disease. There'll be no more poverty. There'll be no more war. There'll be plenty. And there's a lot of descriptions given how there'll be so much abundance, and nobody will have to work. No one will have to work for a living. We'll be able to dedicate our full time just to knowing God and studying about God. And that's like the miraculous era that's going to happen, which is actually so interesting because I was reading some reports that they're publishing now, all these predictions of AI eliminating the need for work in the future. I don't know if anyone here has read those, but just in the last month, I read at least 2 different articles that are predicting that the way we're going with AI, not in a scary way that AI will take away all the jobs, but we're going to reach a point where our world can have so much automation that work won't be necessary for people to survive, and we can actually have robots and computers doing all that work that people need to do. And I don't know exactly how the math adds up, but they're basically predicting a time where people don't have to work in order to survive and do well. And I'm thinking, gosh, this is like matching up with what Judaism tells us, that there's going to be a time where we won't have to work. We will just be able to study and serve God full time. So who knows? Maybe these are the little hints that it's coming very soon. But I'd like to read this inside because I think it's spelled out very clearly inside, where the Tanya is going to explain to us, as we mentioned a few times, that it's not like we might think that we do all these good deeds and then God says, yay, you scored X amount of points. Ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. Now I'm going to bring you your big pizza party. Mashiach is coming. But actually, all the work that we are investing now, all those good deeds that we are doing, they're really all pieces of the puzzle. And all of that work together, when it reaches a tipping point, then we will achieve a natural state of a more godly world that will usher in this period of redemption. Let's read it inside and then we'll pause for questions. I highlighted a lot of the text here. So now this ultimate perfection of the Messianic era and the time of the resurrection of the dead, so those are the 2 sections of the period when Mashiach will come, meaning the revelation of the Ein Sof light in this physical world. Clearly, we'll have a world in which godliness is fully revealed here, is dependent on our actions and divine service throughout the period of exile. Unlike the aforementioned revelation at Sinai, which was initiated by God. Remember, we said at Sinai, Jews had this revelation, and what happened? We all fainted. We couldn't handle it because we hadn't done the work to refine ourselves to be able to handle this light. But in the future redemption, it's going to be the accumulation of all of our work. The world will reach a point of refinement, and humans will reach a point of refinement so that we will be able to handle it. So much so that we will be able to live in this very miraculous world. For it is the mitzvah itself that causes its reward. There's a saying in the Ethics of Our Fathers. It says, schar mitzvah mitzvah. The reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah. And there's many commentaries on that. What does it mean, the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah? At the most basic level, you do a mitzvah, God will give you the opportunity to do more mitzvahs, right? That's kind of what it sounds like on a very basic level. Here, the Tanya is giving us a different explanation for it. We're saying, you know what the reward for a mitzvah is? The mitzvah itself. Kind of like what the example we've given a few times where a parent tells the children, clean up the playroom. If you clean up the playroom, you'll get, I don't know, ice cream, stickers, whatever it is. That's option A. Option B, the parent says, let's clean up the playroom. You know what the reward will be for cleaning up the playroom? We'll have a clean playroom. Can you guess what I was busy doing yesterday? Yeah, we were cleaning up the playroom. So the Tanya here quotes this idea to tell us that it's not arbitrary. Like the coming of Mashiach, the world reaching this holy refined state is not like a carrot on a stick. It's actually something we're working towards. We are refining the world and making the world holy now so that we can reach this state. By performing the mitzvah, man draws the revelation of the blessed Ein Sof light from above downward, to be clothed in the physicality of the world, meaning in the object which had until now been under the dominion of Klipat Noga and had received its vitality from Klipa. I'm going to explain in a minute. Namely, all the pure permissible objects with which the act of the mitzvah is performed. By performing the mitzvah, man draws the Ein Sof light upon the object with which it is performed. So just to recap, which we mentioned in earlier chapters, the Tanya spoke at the very beginning of the Tanya, we spoke about this idea called klipa. What is klipa? Klipa literally means shell or skin. And we were told that in general, this world is divided into two categories. There's a category of holiness, things that are clearly holy, and then there's a category of klipa, things that are under shell. Now, within the category of klipa, there are two types of klipa. Vast majority of the world is a translucent shell. It's a shell that's pretty easy and possible to peel off and reveal the fruit that's inside. There is a small minority of things that the Torah prohibits us from engaging with, and those things are klipa, but they're klipa that we're not supposed to engage with, and we don't really have the ability to crack it open, think of them as like coconut shells. So 99% of the world around us, of the physicality around us, is klipa, but it's translucent klipa. Things like money, work, health, furniture, shopping, clothes, whatever, fishing, vacation, all of these things, they're not holy, but they're not bad. They're just klipa. They're just kind of wearing this translucent shell. Now, our job is to peel back the shell and the skin and show that this is really godliness. How do we do that? When we utilize these items for a holy purpose, we are revealing, it's like we peel back the skin and we're revealing, oh, this too is godliness. So think, for example, of a banana. I have a banana, I'm holding the banana, all I see is banana skin. Now, I know that I need to peel the banana, and when I peel the banana, I could reveal the fruit that's truly inside, and I can really enjoy the fruit. So when I take this idea of, clothing, and if I just have clothing just because I love collecting clothes, that's like me just focusing on the banana and being like, oh, banana, look at this amazing yellow skin. It's so pretty. It's so beautiful. And forgetting that actually the point of the skin is to peel it off and enjoy the fruit inside. And the skin is there to serve a purpose. It's there to protect the fruit, to, hold the fruit together. But we know that eating the banana peel and throwing out the fruit would be very silly. It would defeat the purpose of what the fruit is there for and what the skin is there for. So somebody who gets lost in just amassing clothes and doesn't think of trying to use clothes for a higher purpose, that's like eating the banana skin. How do I elevate clothing? Oh, I wear clothing for honoring God. I wear special clothing for Shabbat. I wear respectable clothes for to present an idea to convince my Jewish friends to do a mitzvah. I wear nice clothing to a Jewish wedding. I donate clothing that I don't need to poor people who can use them. All of these things are ways in which I elevate the clothes. How do I elevate, exercise? Well, I can exercise again. I can get lost in the skin and just exercise for the sake of exercise because I'm going to, idolize this concept of having an incredible body and, exercising my entire life. Or I can be mindful that I want to exercise because I want to be healthy so that I can serve God with a healthy body. And now I'm still exercising, but because of this mindfulness, I'm actually elevating the exercise, the act of exercising, the items that I'm using to exercise. So this is what the Tanya told us a long time ago, that most things in the world, most physical things in the world can be elevated if used for the right purpose. So coming back to this chapter, the Tanya is telling us you have to remember that our goal in this world, our collective goal, is to peel back all the banana peels. Like every single item in the world should be peeled so that we can show This too is for God. So peel back the banana peel on the clothing, on the exercise, on the food, on the shopping, on the vacation, on the money, on houses, on cars. Almost every single thing can be used for a holy purpose. And when I do that, what happens when all of the items in the world get used for a holy purpose, or a critical mass of the items in the world get used for a holy purpose? We have basically peeled back the banana skin on most of the world, and now the world can finally reach a place where you see the fruit. It's very clear that this is God's home and God could be comfortable here, and we move to a stage where we're living in a much holier world. So here it's going to break it down by giving us examples of different items that we can use and how using them in the right way elevates them. And it's interesting, it's going to give us 3 examples. One from the animal kingdom, one from the plant kingdom, and one from domem, the kingdom of what's the word for domem in English? Inanimate objects. So it's going to kind of give us examples from different elements of creation of how we can use things for a holy purpose. So, and it's interesting, the Tanya also makes sure to emphasize permitted items, meaning don't think for a minute that you can take a, God forbid, a ham sandwich and peel back its banana peel by making a blessing on it. No, if it's a non-permitted sandwich, if it's a forbidden relationship according to the Torah, if it's a forbidden food item, then it's off the table. God says those are peels, those are like coconut peels. I don't want them peeled. I want them to stay the way they are. That's something I'm going to take care of. The vast majority of the things around us are not in that category. So let's look at the examples. So for example, the parchment of the tefillin, the mezuzah, and the Torah scroll, which must be made from skins of permissible kosher animals, right? I can't take a non-kosher animal and use its skin to write a Torah scroll, God forbid. That would not be a kosher Torah, and that would not elevate the animal or its skin. We need to use kosher animals. As our sages said, for the work of heaven, mitzvah objects only that which is pure and permissible to eat may be used. So now the parchment that's used from such animals, it started off as being under the dominion of the klipat noga. It is this just translucent skin. It's just klipa. It's just kind of there. It's not holy. It's not holy. When I use it to make a Torah scroll, and then that Torah is read from or studied from, guess what? Not only the Torah scroll is holy, the animal that it came from becomes holy. The family of the animal that it came from becomes holy. And there's a whole segment of the animal kingdom that was just elevated by me using that parchment to write a Torah scroll or a mezuzah. Similarly, so that's from the animal kingdom. Let's look at the plant kingdom. An etrog, that's a citron, that's a yellow fruit we use on Sukkot. First, I need to make sure that it's a permissible one. There are laws. Some people may be familiar, the laws of Orla. In Israel, when you plant a tree, in the first 3 years of a tree's life, we cannot enjoy its fruits. So if we know that an etrog came from Orla, it's considered not permissible, and we cannot use it for the mitzvah. So we have to make sure that it's a permissible fruit. But if it's a permissible fruit, and we use it to shake together with our lulav, then what did we do? We just elevated that entire plant, that entire tree. A whole section of the plant kingdom was just elevated, and we revealed its holy inside. Yes, Sarah. Sarah?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we do.
Okay. Just a quick question on that. Some of these things are obvious because it's in the Torah, but things that are, I'll say, more modern inventions that are not necessarily listed in the Torah. I'm thinking about like do you remember the sheep dolly that was, they completely, I don't know, I'm not in that type of science, but basically they completely recreated the cellular system and made a new sheep basically out of nothing.
She was the first clone. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So like that's not a very clear cut parav, meaning things that are more modern invention that are not necessarily referenced in the
So
Torah.
So that's a good question, but you're really getting into a whole different category of like, what about, Jewish law that are the questions that only came into existence recently, right? Like, the light switch. Is flicking on the light switch on Shabbat just as severe as, lighting a fire on Shabbat? Is the same as making Kiddush and, you know, lighting Shabbat candles? So it's, it's worth a discussion, but in very short, Torah gives us precise guidelines in how to decide Jewish law when we come across situations that are not written in the Torah. So, and we're also guaranteed that if those rules are followed in trying to obtain a halachic conclusion, then we can be sure that the final conclusion is God's will. Meaning the Torah gives us a clear set of guidelines. This is how you interpret Torah. These are laws that you need to follow. It also tells us who has the authority to come up with halachic conclusions. So if somebody who has the authority to come up with halachic conclusions is following these guidelines of how to draw halachic conclusions, then the ultimate conclusion is halacha, even though we often will have halachic conclusions that are different from each other or contradicting to each other. But regardless, if each one of those was derived in the way that the Torah spells out for us to derive halachic conclusions, then each of those are considered Torah.
Does that mean like Ashkenaz and Sfard
Yeah.
customs?
It could
Okay.
be, yeah, 100%. For Sephardim to eat rice on Passover is not any less, adhering to Passover than for Ashkenazim not to eat rice.
Mm.
But someone, again, because it really digs into the whole like deeper question of, it's actually interesting because the Jewish Learning Institute now is running a course. I know there are a few Chabad houses in the DFW area offering this course exactly on this topic, on how modern day questions could be resolved based on halacha, and how really halacha kind of translated from generation to generation. It's a very, very fascinating course, and it kind of brings up all these different situations that have come up in Jewish history, and how the rabbis approached it based on the same methodology, and really what stayed the same in each of these and continues to this day when they're trying to, they have to come up with conclusions about AI, like what is and isn't allowed, what's according to Jewish law, what's not according to Jewish law. We do have a very clear set of rules of how we approach these things. And as long as we apply the rules properly, the conclusion that we come to is 100% considered part of Torah. That makes sense?
Thank you. Yeah, no, it
All
does
right,
very
so,
much.
yeah. Okay, so we deviated, but we gave an example from the animal kingdom. That's when an animal's skin is being used to write a mezuzah or to write tefillin or Torah scroll. We gave an example from the plant kingdom when I have an etrog that, of course, is a permissible etrog, and it's being used to shake with my lulav and to make a blessing on it. We just elevated that whole section of the plant kingdom. The example it's going to give from the inanimate kingdom or inanimate section of creation is money. What about money? Money given to charity. Now, again, we have to make sure that it's kosher money. If this money was acquired in a kosher way, that means I didn't steal the money, I didn't cheat to get this money, but I got this money in an honest way, then when I give this money to charity, I am elevating the money and everything that went into it. And this is, it's interesting to note. The Tanya kind of mentions it as a side note, but it is interesting to note, when somebody is, I don't know, filing their taxes, and sometimes they're like, oh, if I adjust it this way, if I adjust it that way, maybe I'll save myself a little bit of money, but don't worry, I'm going to give that to charity. Like, if I get, if I'm able to figure out how to get a bigger refund, and maybe it's not like 100% kosher, but don't worry, I'm going to give all that extra money to charity. Tanya says, no, the money given to charity needs to be kosher. It's like, giving non-kosher money to charity is like trying to make a blessing on a pork sandwich. It's the same thing. God says that's not something I want to elevate. So considering, assuming that the money was acquired in a proper way, when somebody gives it to charity, So here's what's interesting. The Tanya is now going to explain to us what are we elevating when we do these mitzvahs? It's not only the money, the etrog or the etrog tree, and the animal. But listen to what the Tanya says. Now, when one fulfills God's commandments with all of these objects, the vitality within them ascends and is dissolved and absorbed within the blessed Ein Sof light, which is his will that is clothed in the mitzvahs. So we kind of peeled back the skin on these items, and now, ping, we just elevated the tree, the animal, the money. In addition to that, let me just see here. Okay, the Tanya is going to recognize that all of these mitzvahs don't exist in a bubble. When I'm using an etrog to shake with my lulav, it doesn't exist in a bubble. Firstly, I had to spend money to get the etrog. I may have had to drive to wherever to pick it up. Somebody had to climb up on a ladder to pick the etrog from the tree. Someone had to bring a ladder. The ladder had to be bought and created, and built in this place. Someone may have had to fly down to Italy or to Israel where we get the etrogim from. So all of that effort and all the effort, all the human effort and all the human investment and all the money, everything that went into getting me the etrog in my hand so that I can make the blessing on it, the energy in all of that gets elevated when I make the blessing. So when I light my Shabbat candle on Friday at the right time, not only am I elevating this candle and this lump of wax, I'm actually elevating the whole pack of candles that I bought. I might be elevating a whole section of the factory that produces these candles and the matches, because all of those are now coming into use for the mitzvah. I am elevating all the energy that I invested in trying to get these candles. What if I traveled really far to get these candles? What if I only realized on Friday at 3 p.m. that actually I'm out of candles? And I took extreme effort to get myself over to the store and make sure to pick up a pack of candles in time to light them. Every single bit of effort and every single item that was used to bring these candles to the point which I'm doing a mitzvah with them, all of those things get elevated. And that really can explain to us how it's possible for just a bunch of humans to elevate every item in creation. It's like, what do you mean? God created this vast universe. How are we supposed to elevate and peel back the banana peels on every single thing in the universe? So, but when you realize the chain, that if we're such an interconnected web of people and events and things that are affected by every mitzvah that we do, we realize that actually the effect of our actions is so much wider than we think. When I decide to visit somebody to cheer them up because they're not feeling well, or to do the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, guess what? The gas that I put into my car, the factory that produced my car, the gift bag that I'm using, maybe my whole collection of gift bags, because I have a collection of gift bags to make them available so I can bring gifts to people. All of those things are elevated. And I have now taken a whole section of the universe and peeled back its layers and peeled back its skin to reveal the godliness in it. Now, it's not just me acting in a bubble. It's every single, think of the collective actions of all of us together, of all Jews together in the entire world, of all previous generations before us. This process began, the Tanya tells us it began with Abraham and Sarah, the first Jews. From when God told Abraham, Lech Lecha, go, travel to the land, at that moment, Abraham and Sarah began the journey of starting to what's called reveal the sparks, peeling back. I don't know, we got into banana skin, but that's kind of, peeling back the banana peels. They began to peel back banana peels on every element of creation that they touched, and the generations after them as well. So when I sit in my room and I say, big deal, I'm lighting my little candle in my house, no one sees, I don't think it affects anybody. There was a whole section of creation that I am affecting through my mitzvah. And I might be adding that piece of the puzzle that's been missing since the days of Abraham and Sarah. And it's interesting. I find that this answers another interesting question. Sometimes we say, if I look back at the previous generations, maybe my great grandparents or, 100, 200 years ago, in the times of the matriarchs and the patriarchs and the times of the Talmud, those were like big people. They did big stuff. Like, we're like nothing compared to them. So the little things that we do, you can't compare that to, receiving the Torah at Sinai. You can't compare that to, incredible things that those Jews did. When you're putting together a puzzle, you do a family activity and you have this 1,000-piece puzzle or a 5,000-piece puzzle, and then you have, maybe the real puzzle expert in the family is sitting and doing all the complicated stuff. And you have the little child who's just doing the edges because they kind of learned how to put all the edge pieces on the puzzle. And then you have the person who's, they're doing the flowers because they know how to do the flowers. It almost doesn't matter who does the big parts and who does the little parts. You do whatever part is assigned to you. You do whatever part you're able to do. You do whatever part you have access to. So true. Maybe in previous generations, they dealt with big things because you know what? Most of the puzzle wasn't even done. Today, vast majority of the puzzle is already done. We don't see it with our physical eyes, but we are told that we have elevated vast majority of the sparks that need to be elevated. There is a little more that needs to be done. And when we get there, boom, critical mass, it'll flip and we will see. The world will turn into a place where godliness is revealed. So maybe I'm doing a little piece, but this is a little piece of a very big puzzle. One example that's given is, I like this analogy of a tall giant was walking around a palace and really, really wanted to see the king. But the palace had these tall walls around it. And the giant was like, the giant's really tall. The giant was really hoping that, he can stand on his tippy toes and just kind of see over the walls and get a glimpse of the king's face. And no matter how hard he tried, no matter how tall he was, he still couldn't see. He was just missing, just like 2 feet to be able to see over the wall. And suddenly the giant encounters a little child, like a small little child, and tells the child, hey, I have a great idea. I'm going to lift you up on my shoulders. When you're standing on my shoulders, you'll be able to see the king. I can't see the king. I'm just kind of missing 2 feet here, but you'll stand on my shoulders, you'll see the king, and you'll describe to me everything that you're saying. And so this, that's what they did. The little child stood on the giant's shoulders, and the little child is seeing these incredible sights of the king and the queen and royalty and describing everything to the giant. Our generation today is like the midgets or the child on the giant's shoulders. We're not working in a bubble. We stand on shoulders of thousands of years of giants of Jews. Our ancestors gave up so much to preserve Judaism, to bring goodness into the world, to do mitzvahs, to do things that we can't imagine ever doing. But there's still some work left. And we should never worry about us just being these little children or these little midgets compared to previous generations. It's okay. They were great. They were giants. They still need us on their shoulders to kind of make it to that final end goal. And this is, in short, the Tanya is going to elaborate further, but this is in short how the Tanya describes that we can together, collectively, through our mitzvahs, we can actually bring the world to its ultimate goal. So if we're going to go back to the question that we started with, where we say, what's the point? What's the point of waking up every morning and having the same struggles and trying to do the same mitzvahs, and some things just never get easier? I'm not becoming this righteous person that I was hoping to become. Well, guess what? That's not what God wants. God wants his puzzle to be complete. You put a piece into the puzzle today, awesome. You put another piece in tomorrow, even more. Every action that you take is bringing the world towards this place of perfection. And that also highlights the idea that action is better than personal refinement. Yes, it's great to become a refined person and a holy person and connected to God. Those are all great and beautiful, and God wants a relationship with us. All that's true. But like Lorraine likes to say, at the end of the day, what matters most? What does God actually need? He needs his world elevated and refined, and that could only happen through action. That doesn't happen through prayers or meditation or, singing holy songs or being inspired. It happens through, doing what needs to get done. So getting out there and doing those mitzvahs, no matter how small they seem, that's how we actually bring the world to its ultimate goal. And Tanya goes a step further, which I find fascinating. But Tanya says, what if we're going to go back to the example of the kids in the playroom, right? So there's always, I don't know about your families, but in my family, there's always the kid who says, all right, I'm going to sit here on the couch and I'm going to help mommy count to see how long it takes, and they're going to excuse themselves from doing anything and just watch everyone else do all the hard work. But Tanya says that's not going to work. You know why? Because every person was actually assigned part of the puzzle. And it's going to quote a Kabbalistic idea. We're told when the Jews left Egypt, there were 600,000 Jews who left Egypt. We're told there were 600,000 Jews who stood at Mount Sinai. Now, we actually know there were more than 600,000 Jews because 600,000 Jews were only including the men of military age. So what about their wives and their children and their parents? So the Kabbalah explains that there are 600,000 general Jewish souls. All Adam and Eve were the first, and from after Adam and Eve, God basically took from their soul. Their soul was a very general soul. God split it up into 600,000 general souls. Now, in the times of the receiving of the Torah and leaving Egypt, the general soul included the whole family. So a woman and children and the parents may have all been included in this general soul. They were still counted as one soul. So when it tells us there were 600,000 souls at Mount Sinai, there were actually about, I think it's about 3 million people at Mount Sinai, but it's referring to these general souls. Over the years and the generations, we've had more than 600,000 Jews. We're told that every one of us has a piece of one of those souls, because a soul is not a finite thing. A soul is energy. It's like a fire. I can take one flame and light 10 candles with it, and all of them are equally beautiful candles. None of them get diminished. A soul is the same way. So Kabbalah teaches us that every one of those 600,000 general souls was assigned a piece of the puzzle, a section of this world to elevate. Meaning that every piece of a soul, every single one of us, has been assigned a piece of this world that is our puzzle. It's our piece of the puzzle. That means that my soul, practically speaking, I am responsible to do certain mitzvahs that no one else is able to do. And the world cannot reach its ultimate goal if I don't clean up my corner of the playroom. No one gives us a piece of paper that says this is your corner of the playroom. How do we figure out, going back to the discussion, how do I know what's that part of the world that's waiting for me? So that, it's a long discussion, but really we have to see which mitzvahs are available to us that are unique to us. And we each have access to different things. We live different lifestyles. We have different financial means. We have different family situations. We have different personalities. When I encounter a mitzvah opportunity that I am able to do, especially when it's not something that necessarily I see other people who are able to do it, I know for sure this is part of my puzzle. This is my piece that I definitely need to work on. And with every single one of us being assigned specific parts, we need to pay extra attention to the mitzvahs that come our way. And God's waiting for every single one of us. None of us could sit back on the couch and say, we're helping mommy count. Every single one of us needs to sit and do every mitzvah that comes our way, every mitzvah that we're able to fulfill that comes our way. And together we're going to complete this puzzle. I want to read that inside and then we can stop for questions. Okay, there's another part here that I didn't mention when we said that action is the main thing, because it's really the physical action that's going to affect the world. So it mentions here that therefore even mitzvahs that are speech mitzvahs, like prayer, or Torah study, it actually is more powerful when the more energy we physically invest in it. So when I say my prayers out loud, I am actually more physically invested. There's more energy. I had to eat more food to have the energy to be able to say my prayers out loud than I do to just read them with my eyes. So the more physical energy I exert into doing these mitzvahs, the more powerful they become and the more they're able to help this job of completing the puzzle, which is why it's so interesting to see when Jews pray. What do we do when we're really into our prayers? It's a whole full body experience, right? We shake, we sway as we pray. It's part of us exerting physical energy into doing God's will and making this physical world a holier place. So I found that part very interesting. And it quotes here, it says, all my bones shall declare God who is like you. This is a section of the prayers that we say. Like with all of our body, we need to be serving God because the physical action that we do is the most powerful. I want to go to the section about the souls. Sorry, one second. Here. When the whole neshama, the divine soul in all of Israel, which is divided into 600,000 particular offshoots, meaning all 600,000 general souls are really all connected, because really we're all one soul. All the souls of all Jews are one and connected. All Jews in this generation and throughout the generations. But there are 600,000 offshoots, as we described before. When all of these souls will fulfill, each individual soul, the 613 commandments of the Torah, and when they refrain from transgressing the 365 prohibitions to restrain the 365. So here's what it tells us. It says it's twofold. On one hand, every single soul has the bit of this world that it's responsible to uncover and to fix. In addition, the 613 commandments that God wants us to do, God wants every single one of the 600,000 souls to fulfill every single one of the 613 commandments. That's how we can achieve. If I want the ultimate puzzle perfection, I want every single soul to be connected to each of the 613 commandments. How's that possible? Most of us don't get to fulfill all the 613 commandments in our lives. Even just if you just look at, there's so many commandments that are just opportunity. Like if you find a lost object, you need to return it. What if I never found a lost object? That mitzvah doesn't apply to me. There are mitzvahs that are only applied to kings. There are mitzvahs that only apply to Levites. There are mitzvahs that only apply in temple times. So this is, explained. It doesn't go into so much detail here, but there is the concept in Judaism of reincarnation of souls and soul parts. So remember, we're each part of one of these 600,000. So it could be that there are mitzvahs that I won't encounter in my lifetime, but someone else who is a soul partner who kind of shares another piece of the same soul that I share, they will encounter those. And it could be that neither of us will, but maybe in a previous generation, in a previous incarnation of our souls, somebody lived and did do those mitzvahs. So I don't have to sit here and worry and say, well, there's mitzvahs I'm never going to encounter. How am I going to do each of the mitzvahs? At the end of the day, I need to look at what's in front of me, look at which mitzvahs I have the opportunity to fulfill, and make sure that I fulfill them to the best of my ability. Because the world is waiting for every single soul to do every single piece that it's responsible for. And together we can then uncover this grand puzzle, which will bring to the time wherein I shall banish the unclean spirit from the earth. Ultimately, as soon as we reveal the big picture, like when you uncover the finished puzzle, there's no room for the darkness anymore. Remember, we said all the darkness, all the evil is klipa. It's shell. It's skin. As soon as I reveal what's the real picture. So I need a critical mass of the puzzle to reveal the big picture. All the other skins fall away. It becomes so clear what the bigger picture is, what's really happening here. And all of us together have the ability and the responsibility to solve this puzzle together. I see we've hit our 9 o'clock, so I'm going to pause. But if we're just going to summarize what we've said until now in this chapter, we covered a big chunk of the chapter. It's at the end of the day, if we want to understand why every single one of our actions matter, in the big puzzle, in the big picture, there is a big picture and a big purpose to the world. The world needs to reach this state of holiness where holiness is revealed. And every single one of us was tasked and is tasked with uncovering part of the world so that all together we can uncover all of it and bring about the coming of Mashiach. So no matter how small the mitzvah might seem, every mitzvah that I do affects this, adds to this. And it's not only the little mitzvah, there are repercussions because it's the items that I use for the mitzvah and the energy that I use for the mitzvah and the food that I ate to have the energy to do the mitzvah and the factory that produced the candles for my mitzvah. And every mitzvah that we do really, affects a whole section of the world that we're making holy. I'm going to end with one quick story. This is actually a very interesting story. It's a famous story there's a man named David Chase. I believe he lived in New Jersey. He was a Jewish philanthropist in the, 50s, 60s, I'm not sure. Anyway, he told the story. I said, actually, the Lubavitch Rebbe repeated the story, but without his name once at a public address. But this David Chase, he liked to travel, and he owned a yacht. And I see, it was in 1981. So in 1981, he was studying with his Chabad rabbi, and he decided that he's going to start wrapping tefillin every day. And the rabbi bought him a pair of tefillin, and he started wrapping his tefillin every day. And then he went out sailing, and when he was at sea, he was constantly asking his captain, whose name was Captain Winters, which direction the boat is facing, because he always wanted to know, every time he wrapped his tefillin, he wanted to make sure he's facing Jerusalem, while he said the prayers. So he kept asking his captain, like his captain was not Jewish and didn't really understand what was going on. He kept asking him, okay, well, which direction are we now? Which direction are we now? So after a few days, the captain, who was, pretty confused, he asked his employer, are you like studying the principles of marine navigation? Like, why are you so into the directions all of a sudden? So he said, no, actually, I need to know it for religious purposes. I got more involved in my religion and I need it for my prayers. I need to know which direction. Anyway, a few days later, the yacht docked on an island in the Atlantic Ocean. I think it was Block Island. I'm not so familiar, but they docked on like a Sunday on Block Island. And the captain came to his employer with a very unusual request. And he says, do you mind if my wife and I, his wife was also on the yacht, do you mind if we just, go take a break for a few hours? We'll be back in a few hours. So he said, sure. I mean, he thought it was a little strange, but he said, no problem. And when he came back, so David asked him, how was it? Did you guys enjoy your time? And he said, when I discovered that you were getting into your religion and you were asking me about directions for your prayers, I realized that if you can take your religion seriously, I can take my religion seriously too. So my wife and I, it was Sunday, so we actually went out to find a church that we can attend on the island on this day. Now, the Lubavitch Rebbe quoted the story. He didn't say David Chase's name, but he told the story in Yiddish. It's actually pretty cute for those who are familiar with Yiddish or not so familiar with Yiddish. He told the story about a Yid mit a yacht. That's how you would say it in Yiddish. So the Yid with the yacht. And he tells the story that happened so David Chase wrote about what happened to the Rebbe. And he's like, I knew the Rebbe would get a kick out of this. And so the Rebbe actually, repeated the story. And the Rebbe said, look, this one Jew saying his prayers, look at the effect. A non-Jewish captain, together with his wife, rededicated themselves to their own religion to become closer to what God wants of them. Like, we're talking about repercussions of mitzvahs that we do. I'm sure David Chase didn't for a second think of this as part of the repercussions. Yes, he elevated the animal kingdom perhaps by using the parchment in his tefillin, and he elevated his yacht, obviously, but yeah, even people around him were affected, and I can't even imagine how it affected their own lives and perhaps the lives of those who are close to them. The ripple effect is something we'll never fully know. But if we're talking about us having the ability to affect all of creation, we can. We can. Through every mitzvah that we do has a very strong ripple effect of things that we see and things that we don't see, things that people are affected by, things that animal kingdom, inanimate kingdom, plant kingdom, all of these things are affected. And ultimately, God willing, we will all witness the day when Mashiach does come. We'll be able to look back and say, that piece of the puzzle, I did that one. I remember when I worked on that one, because it's something that, it's going to take all of our effort together, and we'll get there. We'll get there together. I want to wish you all a wonderful week. I'm happy to stay on and answer questions if anyone would like to. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you all next Monday.
Thanks, Teeny. Have a good week.
Bye-bye.